If you're a beginning crocheter looking for a fun new project, why not give these mini storage pockets a try? These are quick and easy to make, and they're great for carrying all kinds of small items you might like to have with you when you're on the go. I will be going over absolutely everything you need to know to make two different versions. A plain version that uses a button for visual interest, and one where you crochet a flower that contains a hidden buttonhole. You will only need a very small amount of scrap yarn to make each pocket. I recommend using a 3-weight yarn, also known as 8-ply or double knit, in 100% cotton, and use a size G or 4mm hook. Acrylic will also work quite well for this project. You will also need a stitch marker, either a locking one like this or a bobby pin, which is what I'm actually going to use in the demonstration of this project. If you're making the plain version, then try to find an attractive and unusual button, because it will be the main focus of the pocket. A more simple button works well for the flower version. Either way, the button you choose should be around 3/4 inches or 2 centimeters in diameter. You will also need 2 kinds of sewing needles. The first is one that you will use to weave in the yarn tails, and the second is a smaller needle that has an eye that will both take the yarn we're using but also fits through the buttons we're sewing on. And lastly, I highly recommend a row counter. We will be using this quite a bit for this project. And for this tutorial, I will be using US terminology when referring to the stitches. And in this case, the main stitch you will be doing are single crochet stitches worked through the back loop. These are also known as double crochet through the back loop if you use UK terminology. This stitch is very easy to do, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. So let's get going by attaching the yarn to the hook with a slip knot. Next, we will chain 20 stitches that will act as a sort of spine around which we will be working most of our stitches. There's our 20 chains, and if you look at these chains face up, so to speak, it's easy to see the V's that we normally go into when we work a stitch. But to start out here, I'd like you to flip things over to the back and find the little bumps that happen behind each chain. They're kind of that horizontal little thread that goes behind each one. And that is what we will be working into in the beginning here, starting with this very first bump. So insert your hook into that very first bump. Sometimes that first one can be a little bit stubborn. And it looks like I got lucky and went right through. So insert and draw through a loop, and let's finish a single crochet by pulling through 2 loops. So there is our first single crochet. of this sort of row we're working. And the next thing to do is to put a stitch marker in this first stitch. So if you're using a locking one, that's fine. But again, I like using a bobby pin for this project because it's easier to slip it on and off, which we will be doing quite often. And these little round bits at the end make it quite easy to slip through the two loops that we need. So I've just slipped that into that first chain behind the hook, and that's actually the beginning of our round we're marking there. Okay, so oops, we might have got a bit lost here. So if you lose where the bumps are, just turn back over, look for the V's, and then very slightly rotate around, and there's the next little bump, and work a single crochet into that little bump as well. And continue working a single crochet into each bump until you get to the very end of the chain. So I'm nearing the end here, and the last little bump to work into kind of belongs to the slip knot, I suppose. Alright, so that's how I know I'm at the end. And I should have 20 single crochets, and if you'd like to check to make sure, here's how you would count it. You count the V that has the stitch marker in as the first stitch, and you just count each V along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so to speak, and end with the last V here. There should be 20 V's, and if you've got that, you're on the right track. Now we're going to do something a bit unusual. Normally you would make a chain and turn the work and work back the other way on top of these stitches here. But instead we're going to do something different. We're going to make a U-turn. So let's flip this around the other way. And what we're actually going to be doing is working on the other side of the chain we had in the beginning. And because we worked into the bump of the chain, well, that's left all the little V's of the chain for us now to look for as we come back down the other way. So there is the last single crochet we made in the bump. We're just going to spin around, keep going, look for that very first V on the other side, and work a single crochet into that first V. And we're going to continue working a single crochet in each of the remaining V's until you get back to our stitch marker. So until we get to that last V there. And these can be a little bit stiff because they already have a stitch from the previous step, but it gets easier as we go along. Just persist. Just coming up to the last stitch now. Here's our marked stitch, and I just have to flip that over a little bit. Just need to go into that last V right before the stitch marker. Again, they can be a little bit stiff on this round, but there, I made it. Okay, So again, if you would like to check your work, you would count the stitch that has the stitch marker in as the first stitch and count all the V's all the way around to this last one here, and you should have 40 stitches. And just remember that our very first chain we made is sitting right between the two sides. So let's move on, and this is where our row counter comes in. We've just done round 1. Let's click because we are about to start round 2. So in this project, I'd like you to have the round you are about to work showing on the stitch counter. And to continue, there will be a couple of steps that you will do at the beginning of every round. The first one is to remove your stitch marker, work a single crochet, but this time we're going to work through the back loop. So if this is our V, we're not going to go through both loops like you normally would, like that. Instead, we're just going to go through this one loop in the back. That is a single crochet through the back loop. So everything's the same except for where you poke your hook through. So there we've made the first stitch of the round, and it's very important to get our stitch marker put back on to this stitch. And for the rest of the round, we are working single crochets in the back loop, just like we did for this first one here. And just keep in mind, things can get a little bit crowdy at either end. It can be kind of confusing. Sometimes you might be tempted to go back into that same loop we've already worked into. So be careful about that. It's often more clear if you turn over. It's very clear I've already gone into that loop. So we need to go into the back loop here on that next stitch. There we go, just working single crochets through the back loop for all these 40 stitches. So I'm just getting to the U-turn here. I'll just work these next couple of stitches, and just notice on these first rounds you can see how these stitches here kind of are a little bit distorted, and that can be confusing. So take extra care that you're only working one stitch into each of those back loops, and you can see how that kind of looks like it's flipped over, but that is where you need to go into, and carry on the other side, and keep working back loop single crochets until you get back to the stitch marker. Here we go. I'm just ready to do the last stitch of the round. And again, if you want to count to make sure, in the beginning here you've got all 40 stitches. Again, you start with the marked stitch as the first one, and counting to this stitch here, that should be number 40, that one there, 40 stitches. Alright, so standard procedure, when we get back to the stitch marker, click your row counter. We're ready to start round 3. Step 2, take out the stitch marker, work a back loop single crochet in that stitch that was marked, and put the stitch marker back in. So standard operating procedure, and then continue with the rest of the round, working back loop single crochets until you get all the way around again, all the way around back to the stitch marker. Alright, so I've made it all the way around. Here I am just before the stitch marker. That's round 3 done. So click, remove, next stitch, and replace. 4 things that happen at the beginning of every round. Alright, so let's take a little break here because our little pocket is actually more than likely inside out. So let's poke these corners through, and that gives you kind of a better idea of what we're doing. We're making a pocket. Alright, and eventually when we get to the end we will fold it to make it look like the final product, but for now this is just going to look like just like I say, just a little pocket. We're going to continue working in rounds, so keep going and stop when you click your row counter to show round 10. So it will be a total of 9 rounds, and round 10 is where we start to do something different. So here I am just about ready to finish round 9. Just got a couple more stitches to do. Click to show round 10, and I'll just pause here to make sure you can understand what things are meant to look like. So again, we've got our pocket. And if for some reason you forgot to click your row counter and need to count rows, well, you would find where that beginning row of chains is and start counting just underneath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So counting just underneath these horizontal bars. Each one of those is a round. Okay, so round 10, things get interesting. We start it the same way by removing the stitch marker. Make the next single crochet in the back loop. Put the stitch marker back in. And now we're going to do a round where we add on all our fancy bits. So instead of working all the way around, we're going to continue this round after the first stitch. We work 17 more single crochets in the back loop. And after those 17 stitches, work one more normal single crochet in the next stitch. So go through both loops to work the next single crochet. Now we're going to start the buttonhole. Make a chain 2, skip 2 stitches, and work a normal crochet stitch into that third stitch. So that is our buttonhole. And if you're just doing the plain version of this little pocket, then you can just keep going by working single crochets in the back loop all the way until you get back to the stitch marker. So that's, you already know how to do that, so I won't show you that part. But what I do need to show you is how to make the flower. I might just pull this apart so that you can see what's going on. The flower, we are going to work right now. We're basically going to work all the way around the buttonhole we've just made. So there's no need to cut the yarn or anything. This flower is all built in. Again, if this is too complicated, just do the simple version and just have a plain buttonhole. But if you're feeling a bit adventurous, then let's do that flower now. Alright, so I've done that normal single crochet here. And like I say, we're going to get a pointer. We're going to work using what we have all the way around this buttonhole to make our stitches. And I know that doesn't make sense now, but follow along. I'm going to show you very slowly how to do this. Start with a chain 3 to start off our first petal. And now we're going to double crochet 2 together around this single crochet we've just made. So to do a double crochet 2 together, it's just starting off by making a normal double crochet, pulling through 2 loops, but leaving these 2 loops hanging on here for the moment. So we're not finishing that double crochet all the way. Let's start the second double crochet in this stitch with another yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, got 3 loops on the hook, and now it's time to finish off this stitch by pulling through all 3 loops. So that there is a double crochet 2 together. Let's finish the petal with 3 chains and work a slip stitch in that same space, and just go through the hole, draw up a loop and pull it through to make a slip stitch, and that's the first little petal of our little daisy or flower made. Okay, let's work the next petal. I hope you're still with me. Alright, start again with chain 3. And all these petals have the same procedure. They're just going to be worked in different places as we go along. Alright, so chain 3. And again, we're going to work a double crochet 2 together. But we're going to follow along and go into this stitch here. And that's where we just worked here. Just go around, stick your hook from the back to the front, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, start the second double crochet in that same stitch, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through all 3, chain 3, and slip stitch in the same place as those previous stitches, and that is the second little petal made. Here we go. The next petal goes into the next stitch along right here, so do chain 3, find that next stitch, do the double crochet 2 together, chain 3, slip stitch in the same stitch. You can see how we're kind of working our way around. Let me sort this out here. Working our way around the buttonhole. So the next petal goes in this single crochet that's on the side here. So start again with chain 3, and now we're going to work a double crochet 2 together around the single crochet that sits kind of on the side, the other side of the buttonhole here. So this is where we've left off. Do a yarn over, put your hook through the hole, the buttonhole, come around that single crochet, drop a loop, pull through 2, go through that same space, finish up that double crochet 2 together, chain 3, and slip stitch. You can see where these 2 stitches are in that little hole there. Go back in there again to do the slip stitch, and we're almost done. That should be 4 petals. Let's do the last 2, starting with chain 3. Let's spread this out. There we go. Let's spread it out, and we've got just 2 chains here that we did in the beginning. We're just going to crochet around those. We do that by doing our first double crochet, going into the hole, pull through 2, start the second double crochet, pull through 2, and crocheting those 2 together. Chain 3, go back into that hole and do a slip stitch, chain 3, and just repeat what we've just done with our double crochet 2 together. Chain 3, slip stitch in the buttonhole, and that's the flower done. Oh, phew. That should be, I'll take the hook out, should have 6 petals to our flower. And now we continue back on to the rest of the round on our pouch. We've got to finish the other side. So to do that, we're just going to fold that over, come through, smooth all that aside. You can see we've already gone into that stitch, so this stitch here is the next one, and we're back to doing back loop single crochets. And keep going until you get back to the stitch marker. Here I am, the last couple stitches. I'm 1 stitch away from the stitch marker, and actually I think it might be better to do a normal slip stitch as the very last stitch here, because that's just a little bit more secure. And this is where the button gets sewn on. So go ahead and finish off the yarn, but leave a tail that's long enough for you to use to sew on the button with. You don't need a huge amount, but that just saves you from threading on an extra bit of yarn. So there you go. We don't need the stitch marker anymore. Might need to fluff the flower out a little bit, But in any case, that's how things should look right now. And this is where you sew the button on. So I did the flower version, and the plain version is the same deal. Just thread your yarn onto the smaller needle. And sew the button on right where this thread is coming out. Flip it over and secure. I'm just taking a couple of quick stitches that I go over and over and over and over. Trim it off. Sew the other end in. I won't do that now. But let's have a look at this origami kind of situation here. What happens now if we bring the button towards the daisy, put the button through, and stretch things out. That pocket turns into a little square, all ready for you to store your little tiny essentials. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I've got lots more coming up, so please subscribe so you won't miss out. And I hope to see you again soon.